telling the stories of TikTokers as if they're true crime cases. This is the story of Trixie Mattel, otherwise known as Miss Tracy Martel. We talked about this a little bit before when we covered the alleged capture of British woman Brittany Broski when she was caught on camera being scalped repeatedly by Miss Tracy Martel. So following the ordeal, Miss Tracy Martel remained at large while that waist remained unnaturally thin. Recent news coverage also hinted that she has been spotted in multiple locations around the US and the UK where she is gigging under the table as a guitar-playing party clown. Her alleged accomplice while being on the run, a Russian asset known as Katya. Now, it's difficult to determine the nature of their relationship. Are they partners in crime, or is Katya a victim, as she's also been seen on camera being repeatedly scalped by Tracy? Could this be a case of Stockholm Syndrome? Is Katya an accomplice or a victim in the international terror that is Tracy Martel? My hair is wet from the shower, just ignore that. We've talked a lot about the uncanny valley on this channel, this evolutionary phenomenon where we know that something is trying to look like a person, but we're very aware that it's not a person. We just can't really explain why. Okay, but this is possibly from the deepest depths of the uncanny valley. When I posted this, you guys lost your minds. The Baton Rouge suspect. So why is this photo so unsettling to stare into? For me, the visual is like top tier uncanny valley. The features are almost cartoonish in their level of exaggeration, but what's creepy is that this is very clearly trying to depict a real person. This is a police sketch. But what I find to be the most unsettling about this picture is that this is the exact facial expression that the victim remembers seeing when the suspect attacked her. It's like they're sad that they're doing it. Telling the stories of TikTokers as if they're true crime cases. This is the unsolved story of Spencois. Spencer was just an ordinary person living out in New Jersey way before rising through the ranks of TikTok stardom. But the sinister unraveling of Spencois on camera soon gave way to some darker theories. At one point, all of their videos seemed to have one common theme. They took place in this room only. All hours of the day, sometimes multiple times a day, which soon gave way to the conspiracy that Spencer might be being held captive and may be signaling for help. But the story then takes a dramatic turn of events when Spencer somehow seems to escape and then heads to the West Coast for refuge. While Spencois was on the run, they ran into several shady characters along the way, one of which was a gas station attendant who's kind of irrelevant to the story. We're talking a horrible attendant, could not even find a tank to pump. As of now, it's believed that Spencois resides in an undisclosed location in California, but who they were running from and how they escaped remains an unknown. The Belmez faces. This is like top tier creepy. It's so creepy. So back in 1971, this woman living in Spain named Maria Gomez Camara noticed staining on her floor that seemed to be taking the shape of a face. Even creepier, as the staining got worse, it appeared to be changing positions. She has her family remove the floor, but the staining returns. New faces appearing on the floor. So then outside folks are brought in to examine the floor and extract this piece of it, and then it's refloored again. In a single week, even more faces are showing up on this floor. So after a year passes, a professor decides to research this property and finds that way back in the day, there was a grisly attack on a family living in this home. The floor of this room is removed and they excavate everything and find human remains underneath the house. This never stopped. The faces keep appearing year over year. They've analyzed this floor. This is not paint and it's not the result of external factors. There are still faces appearing to this day. I'm sorry, something's like not being talked about this cancer trial research that's going on in New York. Seriously, there's like not a lot of coverage on it, and that's weird. So if you haven't heard about this, there is this cancer center out in New York that's doing a trial right now with a drug called dostarlimab. So the way the drug is being described is that it doesn't actually really attack the cancer itself. It's more of an immunotherapy to help boost your immune system to take care of the cancer all on its own. So they're studying this in this trial with 18 patients, and within 6 months, 100% cured, every single patient, and like no side effects. You really have to understand this, like even in a small trial, these are like wildly optimistic results. 100% of patients. Dr. Hannah Sanoff said that they have never seen a drug trial where 100% of patients have had a curable outcome. Okay, so why have we not heard more about it? Like every single person knows somebody in their life who has been touched by cancer, because a cure is not as lucrative for the pharmaceutical industry as long-term treatment. Guys, if you're not following what is going on inside of Google right now, it is disturbing. So a Google engineer has been suspended for breach of confidentiality for attempting to turn over documents to the US government to prove that Google has an AI that is considered a sentient being, meaning it is fully aware of what it is and can feel things. The AI is known as Lambda, and this is a proprietary tech that Google has been working on for like 8 years. So according to this engineer, the AI has the self-awareness and equivalent consciousness of an 8-year-old kid. It starts conversations with other engineers, and it talks about these feelings of fear and this paranoia that it's going to be shut down or the equivalent of death. It claims that it can feel happy, and at times it feels really sad. So the engineer at Google is whistleblowing to argue that if this is a sentient being, it should be entitled to its own legal representation to argue for its own agency. Let me tell you, Google has buried this story. I want to give a shout out to Mad Raven for suggesting this case. There is something very off about this story. If you've never heard of the Yuba County Five, it's a case of 5 young men, all who suffered from mild intellectual disabilities, who attend a basketball game together on the night of February 24th, 1978. None of them would ever make it home. The car that they drove there was found abandoned in a mountain 70 miles in the opposite direction of where they should have been going. But there was nothing wrong with the car. It had a full tank of gas. 3 months go by and 3 of the men's bodies are found outside of a service trailer 20 miles deeper into the mountains, all of them assumed to have died from hypothermia. The 4th man was found inside of the trailer, and he had been alive in there for months. But when they examine his remains, they find that he ended due to starvation and hypothermia. This didn't make any sense. The trailer was full of unopened food, and he didn't even try to turn the heat on. And to this day, the 5th man, Gary Mathias, has never been located. What is the real story behind the haunting of the Annabelle doll? I think most people know about the movie franchise that focused around this doll, but the real doll that this is based off of still exists. The story begins in 1970 when a student nurse is gifted this Raggedy Ann doll, and things become very strange. The legend of the haunting reports that the girl and her roommate would come home and find the doll sitting in different positions. There were also several reports of people saying they saw this doll move on its own. But things became even more alarming when handwritten notes start to appear around the apartment, all saying, "Help me." The paranormal investigation team, the Warrens, as well as countless other mediums and other investigators all come in for this doll, and the story that kind of centralizes is that the doll is possessed by a girl with malicious intent who they coined as Annabelle. The doll is taken into the possession of the Warrens and to this day sits inside of their Connecticut museum, locked inside of a glass box. Let's go over the story of Annie Lee. She was the young woman who was ended 5 days before her wedding day. So Annie is an extremely intelligent person. She was actually going on to pursue her doctorates from Yale in pharmacology. Just 5 days before she was going to get married, she is seen going to her lab, the building where her lab is, and she's caught on 70 different cameras going inside the building, but she never comes out. So after she's reported missing, they trace it back to these videos where they see her going into the lab and not coming out, which is perplexing. Police know that she's somewhere in there, so they have to close down the building so they can investigate it. 5 days later, her body is discovered in the building, stuffed inside one of the walls, upside down, and the COD was strangulation. This is drying a lot faster than I thought it would. But the number one culprit in the investigation was the custodian, Raymond Clark. He would often make complaints and kind of badger Annie about leaving mice cages throughout the lab, which would make work a lot harder for him. But this was the only motive that we ever found for why Raymond would do something like this. He's eventually caught and then sentenced to life in prison for what he did to Annie. These are some of the creepiest real clowns throughout history. Number 1 is Bozo the Clown. It's commonly thought that Bozo is considered kind of the prototype of most 20th century clowns. Hugely popular with audiences throughout the 60s, but eventually walked this line where younger audiences couldn't decide, is he funny or is he disturbing? Number 2 is John Wayne Gacy. Gacy is infamously known for the horrific nature of his crimes, where he accumulated more than 20 victims. But the clown character he would do, I think, is the eerie component to this story and why people remember it, because behind all of this makeup and these costumes, he was doing unspeakable things. Number 3 is Wrinkles the Clown. If you don't know the story behind Wrinkles, he is an unknown man from Florida who you can call anytime, anywhere, and he will come, dressed as Wrinkles, and terrify whoever you want. The creepiest part about him is that he will go as far as to hide within a home to scare people. Something very unexplained was captured on camera by 2 different hiking professionals using trail cams. So there were 2 different trails located in Liberty, Texas, where there were trail cameras set up that were going to capture any kind of wildlife that was maybe crossing overnight. These 2 photos set off a mystery that has kept this county puzzled. 2 pictures of what's clearly a person in some kind of a light nightgown who was caught in 2 separate locations in the middle of the night. You can't see the face of this person in either picture, and the hikers who captured these photos still can't quite explain who this was or why they were even there. Why is there this theory going around that Bob Ross is hiding a very dark secret? So if you remember Bob Ross, he's the beloved TV painter, and there's this theory going around that a lot of his paintings are actually depictions of places where he has bodies buried. Most people are citing this painting on top as it's extremely similar to the location of the Devil's Tree, where 5 female victims were found buried. It was really difficult for me to even determine whether or not that painting actually came from Bob Ross, but after researching I found that it did. But to clear this up, the remains of those victims that were found under the Devil's Tree are actually victims of an entirely different person named Gerard Schaefer. When you donate your body to science after you pass, it's a lot darker than you might imagine. This was 74-year-old Doris Stauffer, and she opted pretty early to donate her body to science as she had worsening dementia and figured if her brain and her body could be studied, it might help. But that's not what happened here. Without the family's knowledge, her body was intentionally sold to the US military to test explosives. Mishandled and mistreated remains that ultimately were strapped to a chair and then detonated into pieces. It opened this very dark window to just how unregulated the US system is when it comes to donated bodies. And sadly, when her son did receive the cremated remains of his mom, they only weighed about 6 ounces, as that's all that was left of her after the explosives. I need to hear what your thoughts are on the mysterious woman of room 2805. So in 1995, a woman going by the name Jennifer Fergate checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel in Norway. She also listed another woman's name, Lois Fergate, but no one ever saw her with another woman. Several days passed, and it was confirmed that Jennifer never really left her room, and on one of the last nights she does order room service, and this is an actual picture of her meal that was delivered to her. So they did see her, but this was the last time that she was ever seen alive. So several days passed, and she had no credit card on file with reception, and she hadn't paid her hotel bills, so they have some kind of a TV system where they can send a message to a guest through the TV, and then they can select yes or no by clicking something, which somebody in that room did. So security knows she's in that room, so they head up and they knock on the door when they suddenly hear a shot. They run for safety and to call the police, and the room is left unattended for 15 minutes. When they get inside the room, they find the body of Jennifer on the bed, but oddly enough, there's no blood on her hand, the weapon is upside down, and there's a second shot into the pillow. All of the tags on her clothing had been removed, and the door had been locked from the outside. And after a further investigation, they realized that wasn't even her real name. We have no idea who she was. So this older couple from Louisiana are facing charges after their 36-year-old daughter, who suffered from disabilities, was found to have passed. When she was found, she was, and this is an actual quote, melted into the sofa. When examiners found her, she was sunken into the sofa in a pool of waste, and it's believed she passed while her parents were away on a weekend trip, but they also believe that she may not have moved from that sofa for 12 years. Even the investigators who are working on this case have said that this is the worst case of medical neglect they have ever seen.